Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. I am Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. Tonight's format, for those of you that might be new to these, this is a live Q&A. So we will always start off with any pre-submitted questions. You can always send in questions via our email address at webinar@evoketherapy.com, webinar@evoketherapy.com. Those questions go to the top of the queue and we respond to those first, but you can also submit questions live. So I'll just respond to these. I don't look at them ahead of time. I just take them as I go and make sure that they're edited a little bit for to protect people's confidentiality in case something's revealed in there. So I'm going to go throughout those and respond. You can invite family and friends to these. You can ask questions about family and friends. You can ask questions that family and friends ask you, and then compare my answer to how you might have answered it. Because again, part of this process is learning how to think differently. It's more complex than that, of course, but in a way, it's developing a different sensibility, a different way of being, a different way of thinking about life and its dilemmas. So this is something that I really enjoy doing because we work through these things together, and you can ahead of time guess at how I might answer the question. So with that, let me get into the first pre-submitted question. The first pre-submitted question reads this: I have a 21-year-old son who went through a Voc and a therapeutic boarding school when he was younger. He now lives on his own and is addicted to various substances, on the verge of being evicted, doesn't have money for food, etc. We don't support him financially. One exception is that he recently got arrested and we posted bail for him. He tells my husband and I that whenever we talk to him, that we're always very negative and bring him down. That's not our intention. We want to maintain a relationship and connection with him and be there for him emotionally. He feels that we're not supportive of him, and we bring a lot of negativity into his life because we tell him things that he should be doing differently. He says that he's trying to make changes. My question is, how do we maintain connection and have phone conversations with him when we feel that he's constantly making mistakes, not taking accountability for his actions, not learning from his mistakes, and refusing to stop substance abuse? How do we deal with him, with telling him that we see and give him an honest perspective, that he refuses to see himself but maintain a good relationship at the same time? We're struggling because we're already filtering ourselves with him, but apparently that's not enough. It feels like it feels that we have to be completely fake with him and not tell him how we really feel. Thanks for any insight that you can provide. I'm going to go back to something that I was just telling the audience prior to pressing record, and something that I talked about Tuesday. It actually feels more vulnerable than some of my shares. And as you know, if you're a listener, I have a lot of shares, but this one's raw. This one's fresh. But I think it's too important of an idea to not share it. I was sharing that I've struggled with social anxiety for many years. When I'm in my role, when I'm at work, I don't struggle with anxiety. When I'm speaking to large groups of people, when I'm broadcasting like this, I don't feel insecure or unsure of myself. This is the one area in life that is my safe place. I think a lot of people can relate to that. That the task at work that you do, that you've done for years and years, in many cases, that task is something where you have a great deal of confidence. And with that confidence, of course, the sibling to confidence is humility, right? You can make mistakes at work. I can make mistakes in my professional life, and I can recover from it because of my confidence, because I feel okay about myself. But socially, small talk, chit chat, warming up, those are my challenges. So I was sharing that I just recently went to a retreat, and I was anticipating how I might feel walking into the retreat. The first thing I did for myself is I sat quietly as I entered the campus for the retreat and just noticed the voice in my head, just observed it, observed what it was feeling, what it was thinking, the story it was telling me. So I spent the first half a day practicing mindfulness as I was walking around campus. But eventually that transitioned into something else. I started saying this mantra to myself. It wasn't something I'd pre-planned, but I started saying something to myself, and maybe it was in response to my voice and the repeated statement that I was saying to myself, really feeling with myself was, you know yourself. You know who you are. And that gave me great comfort. And so In the past, when I would look around in social situations and feel insecure, even going to the grocery store, right, going to the gym, I would find ways to think about other people, to compare myself to them, and to find a way that I was better than them or they were less than me. And I did that because it temporarily gave me this feeling of safety, this pseudo safety, if you will. But of course, any mistake that I made, anything embarrassing that happened, anything that somebody said could easily knock me out of that safe place that was like a house of cards. But with the ability to hold on to myself, I was able just to love everybody. And it wasn't that I was suppressing judgment. I didn't have judgment because there was no need for it, because the judgment was the defense, if you will. And all that was left after that was just love and grace for myself and for everybody else. So I've told this story a few times since I've been home. I told it on the podcast the other night. I told it a little bit of this before we started tonight. And I told it to my wife and my family when I came home, just confessing this defense mechanism that I've been living with for all these years. And I couldn't see it until I wasn't doing it. I could have told you about the defense intellectually at times, but I didn't have a lived experience of it in my body until I wasn't doing it. And then it became clear to me what I had been doing and why all this time, right? I didn't apply that skill. It just became apparent to me. So I'm sharing this with my wife, and she said to me, that might be one of the reasons that people will accuse you at times of being arrogant and feeling unsafe around you. And I thought to myself, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. That is what that's the energy that I'm putting out. I don't insult people. I don't openly criticize them, right? I don't attack people or yell at them or call them names or on purpose give them dirty stares, but they could sense that energy. Now, for me, my experience of that when I was doing that, when I do that, my experience of me in those moments is I'm feeling insecure and scared. I'm feeling unsure of myself. So it didn't really resonate with me that this idea of judgment and arrogance that people were experiencing from me, but that was the energy essentially that I was putting out to the world. And regardless of faking it or not, that could be sensed. So here's where we get to your question. This is the big work, if you will. The big work is this. What you think about your son's choices is none of his business. Whether you approve or disapprove of what he's doing is, if I were talking to him today, I would say, who cares? Who cares what your mother and father approve of or disapprove of? Who cares about their critiques or their judgment? So that's the first idea in this question, my answer to this question. It's not his to take care of. It's yours. It's your feelings, it's your thoughts, it's your judgments. You can't just simply wipe them away, but you can hear the message tonight that it's irrelevant as far as he's concerned. I had a friend say to me recently, I love you, but I might not approve of your decisions, but I love you. And I said back to him, I said, I'm not interested in your approval. I have no interest in your approval or disapproval. My mother, when I was separated in 2010, 2011, my mother called me to let me know that I was making a mistake, that divorce was not the answer. And I said to her, Mom, I don't need this. Like, I'm struggling already. Whatever you think I might be doing that's a mistake, if anything, if it is a mistake, it's coming out of this feeling of not feeling well inside. And so I can't surround myself with people who give me lectures and opinions about what I'm doing right or wrong. I don't need that from you. And she made a case, she said, that's my role. I'm your mother. And she was actually saying it. She wasn't being silent like you were trying to be. She was being she was stating it overtly and defending it, saying that's the role of a mother as I see it. And I said to her gently, I said, I don't care what you think the role of a mother is. I'm not interested in what you think a mother's supposed to be. What I'm telling you is if this is the discussion that we're going to have when we talk, we won't be talking. And I wasn't a threat. I said it even softer than that. And we hung up the phone and she called me 2 weeks ago and she said, I've been talking to my therapist and I think I know how to love you. And she said, would you like me to come over and help with the kids when it's your weekend? She lives in Southern California near Disneyland, and she said, "Would you like to, this spring break or this summer, take the kids to Disneyland and I'll help you. Maybe even give you some time off so you can hang out with your brother." So she was able to adjust in the process. So, my thought is own your feelings. You can't not feel them, but no, it's irrelevant what you think about his life choices. And whether you're right or wrong or astutely, um, your observations are astute and critically precise, it doesn't matter. That's not his business. In fact, that energy is probably what he's self-medicating. Or at least it adds to his need to self-medicate because he feels the shame. Because when your parents think that you're screwing up in your life and don't have the wherewithal, their own attachment, their own serenity to hold space for you, right? They either say or they leak out unconsciously or subconsciously the judgments and the criticism that you are so effectively owning in the question that you've written to me this evening. That's what the problem is. So your job is to go to other people. Your job is to share that with other people. And your job, and if you are to do the work that we talk about here at Evoke Therapy Programs, your job is to take that back and to realize it's none of your son's business, none of your children's business what you think about them. In Al-Anon, when we get there, if we show up in the rooms of Al-Anon and Codependence Anonymous, we will hear the slogan, "What other people think about me is none of my business." And that applies first and foremost to parents. Today, my mother will tell me, my wife and I reconciled, among other things. If you sat here, for the most part, in a lot of ways, my mother would tell you, at least some of the time, she would tell you that she's proud of me. And I have said to her, I don't know if I've said this, but I don't think I've said it actually, but I have felt it when she said it because I think it would be too confusing for her to hear. My response is, I'm not interested in you even being proud of me because you being proud of me is still about you. And if I get caught up in you being proud of me, I'm going to get tripped up in you being disappointed in me. That's why I talk so sensitively about that idea of telling your children that you are proud of them. Our jobs, as I see it from attachment theory and everything we know about child development and child psychology, our job is to hold space for the child, and within that space that we hold for them, to have our boundaries. So this question, I can't answer it with a doing answer, like this is what you should do or this is what you can do as it relates to your child. What I can tell you is that the work is to transform your consciousness and to realize that what you thought about relationships and love and parenting weren't necessarily correct and right and helpful. I mean, that's how fundamental these messages are. James Hollis says in his most recent book, A Life of Meaning, he says, we come to this point in our life where we realize that who we have become, in other words, who we are, is our chief obstacle. So the work at Evoke, the work at our Evoke Intensives, the work in our Wilderness program with our children that we work with and with their parents, the work is to become your authentic self. And to do that, you're going to have to steal it. I read a book by Robert Bly called Iron John a few years ago. Some of you might know it. It's a book that was written in the 90s about the men's movement. And he starts off, the book is named after an old myth called Iron John, about a prince who lives in a castle. And on the castle there's this cage with this red hairy monster, if you will. This red man, hair from head to toe. And at one point, as the prince was playing, his golden ball, his treasured toy, rolls and rolls into the cage where this hairy man is, this wild man is. And the prince goes over to the cage and asks the wild man, "Will you give me my ball back, my treasure back?" And the wild man says, "I'll give it back to you in exchange for the key that lets me out of this room." And the prince, being the boy that he is, says, "Of course. Where do I find the key?" And the wild man says, "The key is under your mother's pillow." Right? That's a powerful image. The key is under your mother's pillow. But there's one caveat, he explains to the little prince. The wild man says, you can't ask her for the key. You have to steal it. And of course, the pillow and the space under the pillow represents the dreams and the hopes of mother and what she has, or father and what he has for the child, for the prince. And the idea that the prince can't ask for it, he has to steal it, tells us how this project of growing up must happen. We can't get permission. Your son can't get permission from you to figure out his life. So the prince goes, he steals the key out from under his mother's pillow. He gives it to the wild hairy man. The wild hairy man gives the prince back the ball, unlocks the door, lets himself out, and then carries the prince out into the forest to teach him how to be a man. The wild man was a metaphor for the part of the prince that mother and father found unacceptable. And he had to go out and find it with this metaphorical monster. So the work is yours. If you don't do this work, if you don't figure out that it's not the child's job to make the parents proud or make the parents happy or make the parents approve, if you figure that out, if you do your own work, if you disentangle yourself from your own childhood experiences where people have expectations, then you can do this for your child. That's why. This is how the work is so important, you see. Because you can only be there for the child in so far as you've been there for yourself. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of time. But the journey is joyous. The journey itself is hope. And what I have found in moments and in long periods of time and as a fundamental baseline of feeling is it is so much better. This discovery and this connection to self is home. It's heaven. It's nirvana. It's transcendence. I can't hold on to it all the time. I can easily be pushed out of that place or pulled out of that place in an interaction with my family when things get busy, when I get stressed, when I'm hungry, when I'm exhausted, when I take on too much. And so that brings me to the last part of my answer to your question. How can you show up? The question is, can you? Can you show up curious? Can you show up not knowing? Can you show up unopinionated? And if you can't, you can own it. You can say what you need to say, but you have to remove yourself until you can. And you keep doing that, right? Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, says we approach our loved one in pain and anger, and we approach them with a dear one attitude. And if we are incapable of holding their anger and their sadness and their hurt, then we say to our dear one, we say, dear one, I have to retreat to my practice. And in his case, it's meditation. In your case, it might just be time off, space away, reading, listening to a podcast, meditating, watching a ball game. It's anything that resets your nervous system. And then you come back and you try again. But you take on that responsibility. You don't make the child responsibility for your serenity and your love of them and your patience of them. And you're right, you can't fake it. And it's exhausting. And it's impossible to get it right. And I will say this one last time because I think it's incredibly important. The mistake isn't the problem, mom and dad. The mistake is not the problem. Everybody makes mistakes. It is to be human. I teach this to therapists. The mistake that you make in therapy is not the problem. It's the defense that's the problem. It's the fact that the parent or the therapist can't say, I'm sorry, can't be bigger. Not because they're trying to be bigger because that's a good thing to be, but because they can be bigger. The defense is the thing that does the main wounding. If mom and dad have to be good with good intentions, you use that word intentions, that's the defense. If the therapist has to explain what they were trying to say or what their intention was, that's the defense. That's the real wounding in relationship is the defense. It happens in marriage. It happens in all relationships. casual relationships, friendships. The mistakes are inevitable. But the defense after the mistake is made, which we think is just, what, by the way, what a defense feels like on the inside, to be clear, it feels like you don't quite understand me. You're misunderstanding me. That's what it feels like inside of us. But that's just an example of not having a grounded sense of self, right? If I had a sense of self and you told me I was doing this thing, my response would be, let me look into it. Yes, I can see that. Or no, I can't, but I'm so glad to hear. And it must have been so difficult for you to tell me what you need to tell me because I've reacted so poorly in the past. And so have so many people in your life. So the fact that you would take the risk to try to be closer to me, to tell me about your anger and your hurt at me, about me, I'm honored and I honor it. That's what I try to teach young therapists. If the client has the wherewithal to tell you about their anger, their hurt, their frustration, that is the golden moment when you can show up differently, ideally, than anybody else has in their life. And that is what heals. That's where then they come to realize I'm not crazy. And then they change their story. They change their exaggeration. They change the details of their story because their nervous system response, their threat response has lowered, right? And then they know themselves. And then if they know themselves and that happens over time, then they walk out into the world like I just described to you at the outset of this broadcast, and they walk out into the world not scared, not needing to pit themselves against other people, not needing the defense because there's no threat anymore. Because they're carrying around a copy of themselves that in some way you gave to them. And that's what we call attachment. That stable sense of self that comes from the big people in our lives. Great question. Somebody writes this. We attended a recent Evoke parent support group, and parents commented on the continued closure of programs. Curious to know if we should be worried about Evoke. What can we do? The sentiment was that we want to help, but some voiced it has to be anonymous to protect their children's privacy. What can we do to spread the positive word? We love Evoke. Thank you. You don't have to worry about Evoke today. We're doing great today. We're doing fine. We can always do better. We're not doing as well as we did years ago, but we're doing well. And what you can do is you can leave Google reviews. Really, that's what you can do. You can leave Google reviews and make it anonymous. Give a pseudonym. You're allowed to do that. You can write a blog with a pseudonym. Change some of the identifying details. Let us share it. You can contact USA Today, who published a redo of the article that was written December 2022, and ask them to tell the other side of the story. The stories that are getting told in the media, I have no judgment about what's true and what's not true, except for the things that I'm involved in. I know I have some sense of the truth there. But if people get hurt by programs and programs mistreat people, that's been the claim of this momentum that's being publicized, then the program should be investigated and the people responsible and the ownership and the administration should be held accountable up into legal measures. Like whatever needs to happen needs to happen. We need to protect clients and children. Absolutely, for sure. Having said all of that, so far people haven't wanted to hear your stories and how much of a gift and how much of a transformation this was and how healing it was. They don't think it will sell. So if you want to be involved, and we could use your help, to be frank with you. You can do this, you can do a lot of this anonymously. I've I don't want to be a public, outspoken advocate for our model either in the world in some ways. If I get an interview with USA Today, I was the one mentioned in USA Today as the Evoke spokesperson, and I asked them to be a spokesperson generically because if my name got out there, and my name's kind of out there anyway, I get threats to my family, I get threats to my life, I get threats to my children. I have employees that are having their safety threatened. There's a lot of anger and pain out there. So I completely respect the need for an anonymity, but you can do a lot within that. Google reviews, first and foremost, the more the better. Google reviews, um, blogs for us, and then reaching out to your local um, news media outlets and telling them that you have a story to share about a trending subject in the media that's not being told. I begged the reporter to at least mention the other side of the story, to at least acknowledge the vast majority of voices who speak about this work with such gratitude, such an affection for it. But she wasn't interested in writing that part of the story. So thank you. Somebody said, can you compare and contrast stuffing your feelings, being in control, and being regulated? I'm trying to get a better sense of how those three conditions look, sound, and feel. I grew up in a master class of stuffing my feelings and have spent much of my adult life in control of myself, even when it's challenging. I have to wonder how much of the time I've actually been regulated. Well, regulation is you don't feel them. If you're regulated, you're not feeling the threat, the fear, the shame. Okay. So regulation is not stuffing your feelings, it's having no feeling. When I described my visit to the retreat, I wasn't stuffing my insecurities, my social anxiety. I wasn't feeling my social anxiety or insecurities. So that's kind of the big difference. But let's talk about the steps along the way. First of all, it's okay to tell people about your frustration. One of the things that happens in psychotherapy for me and for my clients is it's the right place to vent to the right people. The 12-step support groups that we encourage you to go to, that's a place to vent and share and dump your pain, your sadness, your grief, your hurt, your anger, your resentment. There's nothing wrong with those feelings. And if we have somebody in our life that's capable of holding it, and I don't think children are generally capable of holding intense, powerful, and repetitive feelings by us, I don't think that works. That kind of goes contrary to our understanding of child development. So the child, that's why I'm so um, careful to suggest to parents that they talk to their children about how they're feeling, their worry, their frustration, their disappointment, similar to that first question I responded to tonight. So, with the exception of our children, if your partner, your friend, your sister, your brother, your parent is capable of hearing it, that's ideal. But the most important idea in all of this is that your anger is yours. Your anger is your responsibility. It's not your child's responsibility. It's your responsibility to take care of it, to grapple with it, to chew on it, to digest it, to metabolize it. That's your job. And that's really at the root of this idea of connection and feeling and sharing and differentiation. Feelings don't disappear. Stuffing, as you call it, doesn't work. It comes up somewhere else in our lives. Physically, psychologically, we leak it. And if we don't leak it comes into our bodies in the form of disease, specifically autoimmune diseases, right? But I wrote this some time ago, and this is the kind of clearest way I can say it. I wrote this. You were wounded, more than some and less than others, but you were hurt. And the way you protect that pain hurts others, most pointedly your children. Work on yourself and discover that your fear, your hurt, and your anger are yours. Take them back so your children don't have to carry them. This is what love looks like. This is what capable love looks like. It's the greatest kind of love that you can give, and it will multiply. Your children will bring even greater healing to their children as you do this work. And in this very simple way, your love multiplies for throughout eternity. That's why I plead and beg for people to come and do their own intensive work. If you have a problem in your marriage and you're just getting into it, come to an intensive, come to Finding You. If you have a child that's struggling and you're overwhelmed with it, come to Finding You. If you don't know what to do and you want to change your career and you're confused and stuck and stagnating, come to Finding You. If you're leaving the faith that you grew up with and you're struggling with the guilt and the shame and the loneliness and your own family of origin shame, come to Finding You. After that, then let's work on some family work. But come to therapy, come to Al-Anon. Those are free. Al-Anon's free. Go to Coda. Go to a place that can hold your pain, your trauma, your sadness, your grief, your loss. And by hold it, I mean witness it, listen to it, connect to it. And then those other relationships will be built on that foundation. Fantastic question. Somebody writes, my daughter was at Evoke for 10 weeks and is now at a therapeutic boarding school. My wife and I are getting a lot of support from a boarding school, and we continue to get great support from Evoke. But I feel like we need a therapist. I need to get a therapist for myself. Is there a specific type of therapist you would recommend for dads in my situation? I'm looking to build on my skills to support my daughter and be prepared for her eventual return home. What are your thoughts on what I should look for in a good therapist? Funny you should ask. I happen to have this little post and a couple of places to go to look. I came up with this idea some time ago, and I wrote this in The Audacity to Be You about looking for therapy, about psychotherapy. I came up with my bullet points of what to look for in a therapist. And I said, bullet point one is look for a therapist who looks for you, who looks to connect and understand and not fix. Just wants to understand compassionately and non judgmentally what your issue is. Yes, they have skills and tools, but that's not the magic. That's not the secret sauce. The secret sauce is the containment. The secret sauce is that they can be different with you than your parents were. And again, this is my method. This is my preference. Others might have a different answer, but I was asked this question. Number two, look for somebody who looks to understand and not diagnose. Yes, you might have a detachment disorder. Yes, you might have narcissistic traits or borderline traits, or you might struggle with depression or anxiety, or you might have a substance abuse issue. All of those things could be true. But that's not what we're treating. Those are just symptoms of this spiritual dilemma, that this part inside of you that was conditioned and taught. It was kind of programmed into you by your context. Specifically, generally, I'm talking about parents when I say context. But it's also your siblings. It's also the community that you grew up with, the culture that you grew up with, and the educational system that you were exposed to. So we treat the person and their spiritual, psychological dilemma, and the symptoms take care of themselves. If you get upset, number three, if you get upset with your therapist, they don't make you the problem. They don't say, this is how you misunderstood me. This is your depression speaking. This is your screwed up filter. This is your anxiety. This is your negatives. They say, thank you. Thank God you had the wherewithal to tell me. I'm so glad that you told me. And so those kinds of therapists tend to be more classically trained, psychoanalytically trained, psychodynamically trained, attachment trained, not attachment styles. That's just the tiny one grain of sand on the beach of attachment based work. It is understanding that the way I feel and think and respond to you is the difference maker. And if I can think and feel about you differently than your parents did in your earlier context did, you can heal. Just like before when I said to you, like, I don't have, I'm not even inclined to approve or disapprove of your behavior. So you get to be yourself. Number four, they apologize when they make a mistake or hurt you. It's really important that therapists model that. My daughter pointed out that we don't have any examples from any of the major religions of deity, at least in this country. We don't have many examples or any examples of deity apologizing because they're perfect. And apologizing might be one of the most important skills or tools in human relationships and in the human experience. We are imperfect. So find a therapist who feels secure enough about themselves to apologize and not explain it away. They're not anxious or eager to fix you. Number five, they're patient. And if you start to feel, I said to a friend recently, I said, you don't owe your therapist your progress. And my friend said to me, I'd never heard that before. And I said, yeah, it's the deal. You pay for the hour, you pay for the time. That's the end of the transaction in terms of the stuff that goes from you to them. You pay for their time. And after that, you don't owe it to them to make progress. You already had parents. You already had grandparents. You already had teachers. So the therapist that's an adequate therapist, that's the phrase I use for a good therapist, an adequate therapist isn't anxious or eager to fix you. That is the fundamental countertransference error, which is just a complicated way of saying the fundamental error that a therapist will make, the energy that they bring into the session. They're able to laugh at themselves. They know that they are not a guru standing on top of the mountain, but they are human just like you, fallible. They're still bumbling through life themselves. Ideally, they're a couple of steps farther along the path than you are. That's ideal, but it's the same path. And there are plenty of people farther along than they are on the path, and they know that. And lastly, they don't need to be a good therapist, good therapist. And they don't need you to think that they're a good therapist. They have made peace with themselves. You know, in dysfunctional families, the one common feature of virtually all dysfunctional families is that there's one rule, and that the rule is that mom and dad are good. Mom and dad have the children's best interests at heart. Mom and dad are loving beings. And yes, mom and dad have some of those things, but mom and dad are also selfish and ignorant and stupid, and they fumble and they hurt their children and they dent their children and all of that. So this idea of being a good therapist, that's something the therapist has to work out on their own time for themselves. I shared a couple of links. You won't be able to click on the links on the screen, but if you Google my name, and it's on my personal website, you Google my name, Brad Reedy, and you put in the title, "Looking for a Therapist Who Looks for You." I talk about this a little bit more. And another article, again, Google my name, Dr. Brad Reedy or Brad Reedy, and Google, in addition, I mean, and put it also in the search, "Climbing to the Mountaintop, Debunking the Myth of a Therapist Guru." Just go to my website and go to my blogs, and you'll see those two articles there. I also wrote an article for the National Association of Therapeutic Schools and Programs on supervision. I think it was in 2016. And you could use that article and find that article by Googling my name and put psychology versus therapy. That's the title that I called it. Psychology versus therapy. Brad Reedy, Psychology versus Therapy. And the NatSap Journal will come up, and then you can find my article there, and that might help you. So thank you for asking. Great question. I'm glad you asked it. All right, I have time for one live question that's come up. All right, let's see if I can do this by myself without my moderator. Well, somebody writes, "Any suggestions on a short, polite reply when acquaintances ask questions about how our 17-year-old son is in treatment is doing when we don't want to answer? We don't feel comfortable lying either. Sometimes we don't have the emotional energy. Sometimes we don't feel it's our right to violate its privacy. And sometimes we feel anxious and embarrassed and judged. We can manage our boundaries, but would like to have a quick go-to on the times that we don't want to discuss." You know, when people ask me how I'm doing, especially clients, but people at the grocery store, people at the gym, when people ask me how I'm doing, my response is I'm hanging in there. My therapist used to say, "I think I'll make it," or "I'm vertical," she would say. And what she's saying is, I'm not just saying something light, and I'm not going to get into it. Again, you don't owe anybody any explanation or any answers at all. I think my response might be, he's hanging in there. If they don't know he's in treatment, you just say, "Oh, he's at this place learning about leadership." It's true. He's at a school where he's learning about leadership, and we sent him to school to help with his not only his academic work, but his character development, his just anything that's general. General is the answer. The funny thing is when somebody asks me how I'm doing and I say, "I think I'll make it," their first response is, "Oh my goodness." And I want to say, "No, that's a good thing. I think I'll make it. I think I'll make it. And I hope you'll make it," right? That's what we got. This week I've been saying I'm fabulous because I happen to be fabulous this week. Jim Brown, he was a football player. Some have argued that he was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, football players of all time. He used to have this thing that he would do. I always found this kind of fun. He would always get up slow after being tackled, really slow. And one time he shared, and they said, "Why do you always get up slow?" And he said, "I don't want the guy to know that they hurt me. So I get up slow every time, even when it's not a big hit, because I want to keep that to myself." It was in the context of a football game and competition. But the answer is be vague. Be vague. Generalities. And if they press on it, you can just kind of excuse yourself from the conversation. Things are fine. We're figuring it out. We're having an incredible experience. Our son or daughter or child is having an incredible experience. Just keep it vague. All right, folks. I think that's all of the questions for this evening. Thanks for working with me without having a moderator this evening. My two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. If you want to do a deep dive into your own work, a therapy springboard or a therapy accelerator, Finding You is our option. March 20th through 24th is the next available offering, or March 8th through 10th, we have an online offering, half the time and about a third of the cost, and you don't have to travel. I'll be hosting March's Returning to You, March 6th through 10th. If you've been to Finding You and you want to come back and reconnect, that's what I did this weekend. I went to a group, to a retreat I've been to many, many times and had no idea it was going to be the best ever. So you're welcome to, we'll try to create the same kind of experience for you at Returning to You, the sequel for Finding You. If you want to attend the Wilderness Alumni or Current Parent Support Group, the next one happens this evening in about 14 minutes, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Contact supportgroups@evoketherapy.com or go to our website and click on the link there. We have an alumni-only meeting, a parent alumni-only meeting for our Wilderness alumni. March 18th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time is that offering. And then for our intensives and coaching clients and alumni, March 11th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time is your next support group. Back to the question about a therapist to find, a great option is our coaches. Our coaches are exposed to this model. They understand the attachment-based model. They have the Evoke philosophy. They come from a wide variety of backgrounds. So contact coaching at Evoke Therapy to find a coach that can help support you on your journey. We encourage all families to try 6 of any of the following 12-step support groups, any combination of Al-Anon.org, CODA.org, FamiliesAnonymous.org, or AdultChildren.org. Also, you can go to RefugeRecovery.org, a Buddhist-inspired recovery program, and the National Alliance on Mental Illness has free classes and resources in your local communities. All of these broadcasts are available on your favorite podcast app, wherever you consume podcasts, or Spotify. You can search Finding You and Evoke Therapy Podcast and subscribe and like us there and give us a rating there. You can also go to soundcloud.com on your computer, or you can go to Evoke's YouTube channel and watch the video versions of these rebroadcast on our YouTube channel. You can find Evoke Therapy programs and me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on X, Threads, and Instagram using the handles @Evoke Therapy and @Dr. Brad Reedy, respectively. You can find Evoke Therapy programs on Evoke Therapy Intensives on Instagram using the handle @Evoke Therapy Intensives, and on Facebook you can use Evoke Therapy Programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives in the search box and find us there. And of course, our blog has wonderful content each week. All right, my next broadcast is right now my favorite subject. I'm going to be doing a summary of couples work again, my next iteration, and I'm going to lean heavily on this book by James Hollis called The Eden Project, In Search of the Magical Others. I love this book. I read it for the 3rd time this year and got so much more out of it and have so much to share with you guys. It's really, really exciting. February 27th, that's next week, February 27th, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, The Eden Project, In Search of the Magical Other by James Hollis. Book review and couples relationships. All right, folks. I hope this was a helpful point of contact for you. And as always, for and on behalf of the people that love you and the people that you love, thank you for showing up to these, and thank you for being willing to do your work. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.